EC2 instances. Welcome to acronym hell in AWS. Amazon Web Services has a lot of acronyms you need to learn, one or more for each service. So as we go through the services, I'm going to try and explain each acronym and service as simply as possible. And from there, we can slowly ramp up the technical level as we move on. Because the goal of this series is to get someone from 0 to AWS certified. So starting off with EC2 instances. Now this is Amazon's most widely used service. The way AWS works is, all of its services kind of act like Lego blocks. Now some services are like the triangle blocks. I mean, sure, you can do some things with them, but generally speaking, you probably won't need a lot of them. And some of these services, like the EC2, are your traditional standard square box that you're going to be using no matter what you're trying to build. Now at its simplest, an EC2 instance is you hiring a computer from Amazon. And by computer, I mean literally just a computer like the one you're using to watch this. And you can customize it. So you can decide which OS you want it to run on, how much RAM you want it to have, the kind of processor you want it to have. So once you've spec'd out your computer exactly as you want it, you can then rent it from Amazon for a set amount of time and pay by the hour. And once you've hired it, you can use it to do whatever you want. So you might use it to host a website, host an app, run some algorithm, etc. So it really is just like borrowing a computer from someone else and paying for it. Now going a bit more technical, if you're familiar with a virtual machine, that's what an EC2 instance is. Now it's called a virtual machine because Amazon has a massive server somewhere, and based on the specs you choose, it's going to cut out a slice of this server and package it in the form of a computer with storage, RAM, operating system, everything you need, and then let you run whatever programs you want on that computer. And just to give you an idea, you can literally create instances with 1000 gigabytes or more of RAM. Not hard drive storage, RAM. Now just like Lego, it is just a building block. What you do with it depends on how you use it and what other blocks you connect it with. Now generally speaking, you're not going to be using an EC2 instance by itself. 99% of the time, it's going to be one small part of a large collection of blocks all working together to make something happen. So when creating an EC2 instance, you have to configure the CPU, the memory, and the operating system based on what you want it to do. But before you do that, you have to choose an instance type. Amazon provides different types of EC2 instances depending on your use case. Now because these are more specialized, they can perform whatever use case you want them to in a much more efficient manner. Now here are the types of instances you can have. The first is compute optimized. As the name suggests, this one has the highest CPU performance and is really good for things like video editing, scientific modeling, anything that needs a lot of CPU power. Now the second type is memory optimized. So this one's for the instances with the highest RAM, and a really common use case is a high performance database, which can keep large amounts of data inside its RAM, making it much quicker to spit out responses to queries. The third one is called storage optimized, and this kind of instance is for low latency and high input-output operations per second. Let me break that down. So this instance is ideal for where you have a very large data set and you're constantly querying data from it and adding data to it. So that's your high input output. And low latency just means it's going to give you your data and put new data in a lot quicker. So now let's move on to pricing options. Knowing the different services and which ones cost more is something you're going to need to know for the AWS exam. And there are three options for an EC2 instance. You start off with your on-demand instance. Now with an on-demand instance, there's no upfront costs, there's no minimum contract. You pay on the hour every hour for the resources you use, and you can close an instance or open a new one at any time whenever you want. This is also going to be the most expensive instance because you're completely in control. Now the second type is called a spot instance, and this is your cheapest instance. So Amazon has a lot of spare capacity on its servers, and it has to have this spare capacity so that if their customers suddenly need to ramp up their resources usage, they can provide that. Like I've mentioned before, AWS promises effectively infinite capacity, which means they have to keep much higher resources than they're ever actually going to need, which means a lot of these spare resources aren't actually being used. So that's where spot instances come in. So this is an instance you get up to 90% cheaper than your on-demand instance, with the caveat that Amazon can take it from you at any given time with only a 2 minutes warning. If a different customer decides to ramp up their usage, Amazon can shut down your servers and give them over to the other customer, who's probably paying them way more. So as a summary for a spot instance, it's much cheaper, but it's only for workloads that can be interrupted. So if you need consistency, you have to go for one of the others. Which brings us to our third pricing option, and that is a reserved instance. Now, like the name suggests, this is where you reserve an instance for either 1 year or 3 years. There's no other option. Not 2 years, not 5 years. The contract is for either 1 or 3. So with a reserved instance, you get an up to 72% discount from your on-demand instances, with the caveat that for the length of your contract, you're going to be paying for that instance. So if your instance is only being used during the day, you're still going to be paying during the night. And if you've got a 1-year contract, but after 6 months you decide you want to shut down your service, you're still going to be paying for the whole year. So you do get it much cheaper than your on-demand instance, but in return you're paying consistently for every hour of the day, and you're still paying a bit more than the spot instance. Now let's talk about EC2 auto scaling. Now one of the best advantages of using cloud or AWS is that you can scale up your resources usage as you want. So if you launch your app today and it blows up, suddenly there are millions and millions of people that start using it. If you were trying to do that on your own servers, you would need to suddenly buy lots and lots of servers to provide for all of your customers. But with the cloud, you've got all the capacity you need and you're only paying for what you're actually using. Now, like the name suggests, EC2 auto scaling means the automatic scaling of servers and resources as needed. So within auto scaling, you can have dynamic scaling, which means the resources scale up once certain goalposts that you set are reached. So you can say once 90% of my resources have been used, I want new ones to be added. And once my resource usage goes below 50%, I want you to shut down an EC2 instance. So that way you can manage your costs. Now the second kind of scaling is predictive scaling. Now let's take Netflix for an example. They experience much higher usage on their servers during the evenings and weekends. So they can predict they're going to need more resources during those time periods. So AWS can be set to automatically scale up the number of resources Netflix is using during those time periods to meet the increased demand, and then scale down once the increased demand is over. Now with EC2 auto scaling, you won't actually scale up the size of your single instance. Instead, AWS will create new instances to run parallel alongside your existing one. This is actually advantageous for you because with AWS, it's always much cheaper to have lots of smaller instances than one gigantic instance. So good guy Jeff is just trying to save you money. That brings us on to our final point. That is elastic load balancing, ELB for short, your second acronym of the day. Elastic load balancing is really useful with the auto scaling I just mentioned. So with auto scaling, as you're adding more and more instances working in parallel, you need elastic load balancing to distribute the demand between those resources so that no one instance is overwhelmed while others are sitting there idle. So it works by providing a single point of contact for your auto scaling group, and the load balancer then redistributes the traffic to each instance as it sees fit. And this way no one instance is overloaded. So as all of the instances slowly get used up, auto scaling will add new instances and the elastic load balancer will make those new instances take up a portion of the work. So together they keep the whole thing running smoothly. Quick side note, EC2 auto scaling will also restart any failed instances. So if any instance fails or shuts down for some reason, auto scaling will have you covered. That's it for this one. Next video we're talking about containers. I've already created a video on Docker which is going to be super relevant going forwards. That said, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and I'll see you in the next one.